So I welcome you to interactive and experiential learning activities using dramatization and writing. And now it won't move at all. There we go. So we've already talked about where you are and who you are and what you do and how you heard about the program. So a little bit about me. I've designed and delivered skill building training programs for over 45 years on a national and international basis. And the reason why I asked you if you had been to those countries is that I've trained and certified trainers in the United States, Kenya, Nigeria, Zambia, Croatia, Jordan, and the United Arab Emirates. And
Exciting.
it was exciting, and I love being there. I don't love the travel part of it, which has gotten even more difficult.
Yeah, it has.
So we're going to be looking first at the difference between interactive and experiential learning activities. And is there a way you would distinguish between them?
Well, interactive, I think, is having actions with other people, whether it's a conversation or a role play, whereas experiential is more mimicking the real world situation and making it as much like that as possible to experiment and decide what works and experience what doesn't work.
Well, those are very good distinctions. I've gone a somewhat different approach, although yours
Okay.
is is actually better than mine.
I
Uh,
don't know about that.
that interactive learning activities engage learners by allowing them to actively participate and verbally respond within the learning environment. And it's characterized by mental stimulation and verbal expression. And then experiential learning activities engage learners physically, mentally, and emotionally in a multisensory experience. And it's characterized by emotional stimulation and physical expression. Now, there's not going to be a test. It doesn't really matter. And many things are both interactive and experiential. For example, physical movement can be added to almost any activity, which many people don't think about, but is
Mm-hmm.
very important. So we're going to look at dramatization and writing options. So I'm defining dramatization as any activity that involves acting out some aspect of the training content. And you're familiar with a role play or a simulation.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever used skits?
No, I don't think I have.
They're fun because they're fun. The whole
Mm-hmm.
idea is taking something like a personality type and having the people who have that personality type exaggerate it. So
Mm-hmm.
what are the pros and the cons of that? And you really have to analyze it thoroughly to be able to answer that question. And then to do a 2 or 3 minute skit with it helps everybody else as well as the performers. So
Mm-hmm.
I enjoy that. Radio theater. I've
That
had,
I have never done.
there's a thing called radio commercial where you, um, in this activity, the small groups are responsible for designing a new candy bar, and they have to come up with a way to market it, you know, in some advertisement, and they can do it any way they want. But the whole idea is that they want somebody to purchase them. And the reason for doing the radio theater is actually to look at how the group interacts. Does somebody lead? Does everybody get a chance to engage and provide input and respond to suggestions? And so it's there. After every 15 minutes, there's a stop to assess what's happening in the group. So it can be but ultimately they do give a 1 minute commercial.
Hmm.
So that's radio theater. Musical group. Have you ever used music?
No, not in a dramatization sense.
How have you used it?
I mean, I've used it in terms of setting the tone, using it to indicate it's time to come back from break. So for logistical purposes, but not in any sort of a performance way.
Right, and those are all good ways to use it. Absolutely. In this case, what we're talking about is having the group come up with some music, design it themselves.
Oh,
So I bring different children's instruments, blocks and flutes, recorders, and things like that. And they have to, again, it's for group process, being creative and how people work together. Singing. Oh, now, of course, I forget his name. Don. He's over in New Glarus, accelerated learning.
hmm,
It'll
not
come,
familiar.
but he uses singing to get
Hmm,
everybody to, um, create a melody that relates to what we're learning. Using it for I can't say the word now, helping you remember what you've learned by singing with it. Now, for
okay.
example, in 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue.
Oh, right. Yeah, I know what word you're looking for, but I can't find it either. Mnemonics.
Right, mnemonics, exactly.
Yeah.
You want to take this over? I think you got it.
No.
And then pantomime. If you want people, for example, pantomiming different expressions and having people guess what that expression is for reading nonverbals. Dance, I've actually used dance. I had a violinist come in and had people doing reels in the classroom, which was unique, but it had to do with looking out for who's available and memorizing steps and paying attention to what's going on around you. And then interviews. I very early in my career, I was an equal employment opportunity counselor trainer, and I was training a bunch of HR managers, all of whom were white males.
Of course.
Back then. We're talking the 70s, early 80s. And I had, did you know Gladys Corbett?
Mm-mm.
She was a wonderful, she is a wonderful woman who is from Peru. And I had her be the interviewer. And I got a volunteer to come out, and he's sitting there in the middle of the room with her, and his legs are, he's very comfortable, taking up a lot of space. And she, in interviewing, started asking him very highly politically charged questions. That, did he support Cesar Chavez, and would he hire this person or that person? And you slowly watched him go into a fetal position because, and just talking about how certain questions are totally inappropriate and what they do to people.
Mm-hmm. So when you are doing these activities, how do you overcome resistance? Because I know when you say, hey, we're going to sing, people are going to just run as fast as they can. How do you overcome that?
Well, there are a few things. In some instances, I ask for volunteers, like for the interview.
Okay.
Or others, like the dance or the singing, say it's your ability is not what's at issue here. The reason we're doing this is because we want to show a different way of how groups work together. And if you're not comfortable singing, you can hum. You know,
Okay.
so it helps for people to understand the why.
Okay.
I've never had anybody say they wouldn't do it.
Hmm.
Now with role plays, the minute you use the word role play, people freeze up and get real
Mm-hmm.
nervous. I tend to call them simulations. I don't know that they're any different than a role play, but
Yeah, I don't think it has quite the same charge to it,
right,
but it is the same thing.
right. Um, so in that case, depending on my sense of how people, they're nonverbals, I may have somebody volunteer to role play with me.
Mm-hmm.
I may very often have small groups work together and say, okay,
Mm-hmm.
take turns handling the answers.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't even say role play it.
Mm-hmm.
I have used role plays where it's a meeting, for example, and everybody is given a different responsibility and role. And sometimes people are more comfortable with that.
Okay.
So, it varies. I was just thinking about the only time I've had somebody not want to do something was in Jordan, where we were going to do the knot game, uh, where people hold hands and create a human knot.
Okay.
It was against his religion to touch other women.
Okay. So it wasn't, I mean, it wasn't just I'm uncomfortable with this. He had a
Right,
cultural reason. Yeah.
right. Although there
I
were other,
did a,
go ahead.
I did a training session in Germany one time, and there was one person in the room who was less experienced. It was a management training, and part of the training was to do a role play. And he was not comfortable with his mastery of English, even though, in my opinion, his English was just fine. But he asked if they could do the role plays in German. And I said, that is an option. I don't understand German, so I am not going to be able to give you feedback. But the group decided they wanted to do it in German and they would give each other feedback. And then he went last and he ended up doing it in English.
Oh,
So, so I'm glad that he got comfortable enough to do that. But I'm like, oh, you just never know. You never know what people are going to do.
no, you don't. Well, I guess being able to voice his concern and have you be open to it made him
Hmm.
more comfortable.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah, good for you. Now we're going to look at writing. So anything that creates a written record. So having people create an activity log, or I typically have people create a personal action plan at the end of a training. Do you do that?
I do. And I try to focus it on um, what are what is something that I am going to research further to deepen my knowledge or my experience with something? And then what is something that you are going to take back and introduce to your team or talk to your team about? And then what is something that you are going to do today, something this afternoon that you're going to do different? So I try to sort of stagger it at different intervals, time intervals.
Oh, marvelous. I love that idea.
Good.
Very nice. Worksheets for anything,
Mm-hmm.
questionnaires for anything, flip chart notations. Now this, what I have found is the minute that I have a small group working and I give them a flip chart, there's always going to be somebody who's going to pop up and write on the flip chart.
Yep.
And that lets our kinesthetic learner
Yes.
get up and move. And then it makes it so much easier for the groups to report out.
Mm-hmm.
Individual assessments, personal notes. There are a lot of written games. Do you ever use word search or crossword puzzles?
No, I don't.
There are free templates or uh, applications online that will create them for you, and they're easy to do, and people enjoy them. So there's a good way to either introduce a subject or check their comprehension.
Mm-hmm.
Then group problem solving. Of course, it could be a case study, it could be anything. Here, there's one, and I'll be mentioning these in later sessions, but envelope pass, where if at the end of a session, there are still some issues or challenges that people have raised that have not been discussed. You write the challenge on a legal envelope, and let's say you have 5 groups and you have 5 remaining challenges. So you write a different one on each envelope and hand it to each of the 5 tables and give those groups index cards, typically different colored index cards. So group 1 has pink and group 2 has green, like that.
Mm-hmm.
They have they have a few minutes to brainstorm their solutions to that challenge, and they put it on the index card. And then when that time is up, they put the index card in the envelope and pass envelope and index card to the next table, who doesn't look at what was written by the previous group. They just brainstorm and put their ideas into the envelope
Hmm.
until it gets all the way around to the first group, who then has to look at all of the cards and rate them from 1 to 100 in terms of points.
Hmm.
So one group's ideas might get 50 points, one group might get 10 points. It all adds up to 100. And then so the group that came up with the highest points total for all of them gets a prize. And the person who had that challenge gets to go home with all of these wonderful ideas that may
Well,
help.
sure.
So
Nice.
yeah, it's really cool. You probably use a parking lot.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about case studies, crossword puzzles. Um, grab the couche. I don't know if you remember that or whether we did that in the class that you were in, but it's been a favorite of mine for years. And this is both experiential and interactive. On the second day of a program, you give people some time to they take 2 index cards and they have to write content questions from the first day. So they write a
Mm.
question on the front and then they have to write the answer on the back, because no fair asking a question you can't answer. And you assign it 1 to 10 points, 10 being it's very difficult.
Mm-hmm.
And they quiz each other
Mm.
at the table. And the reason why it's grab the couche is you would, in the middle of the table, I always have candy. You probably remember that.
Mm-hmm.
Had a couche ball on top of the candy, equidistant from everyone. So you read your question. Whoever grabs the couche first answers it. And if they answer it correctly, they get all the points. If they don't answer it correctly, or if they only answer it partially, somebody else can and you decide,
Mm,
so it was your question, how you're going to divvy up the points, and people are on the honor system to tally up their own points. So it's a good way
nice.
to review the previous day's content,
Mm-hmm. Mm,
and people
I
have,
like that.
and then of course, evaluations. So in summary, dramatization, and I probably listed things there that you didn't originally think might fall into that category, is obviously highly experiential. It engages most of the senses as people are moving around or
Mm-hmm.
interacting. Writing is individual or interactive. Dramatization needs to be introduced gently. we talked about,
Mm-hmm.
but it usually you've got you have people who are eager to do it, and sometimes if people are not eager, what I give them the choice to do is choose to be an observer to give feedback. So that also helps them feel safe.
Mm-hmm.
Writing does take longer for some
Mm-hmm.
participants. So that's always an issue of what you do with folks who get done really fast.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do if they get done quickly?
I don't know that I do much of anything specific. These days, they usually start checking email, which is dangerous. They may go to the restroom, fill their coffee cup. Sometimes, I'll do small talk with them, though you don't want to be disruptive if people are writing, they also are thinking and need focus time. So I don't really have a strategy for what I do with them. I just sort of let it happen.
Which is I think what for the most part what I do, although I will say we have 3 more minutes, you know, so feel free to do whatever you like as long as you're not
Mm,
disrupting your
yeah,
writing.
I do that. I'll give like, 2 minutes, 1 minute, 30 seconds, whatever's appropriate.
Yeah. And then for me, writing is part of most of the interactive and experiential categories of training, of learning activities. I always have a handbook, a workbook that people can write their notes in, can write their answers in, can brainstorm in, so that when they leave, they've got it in to refer to. And I know that there are a lot of uh, training that people go to where whatever their workbook is either left on the table or thrown away when they get out. But I've also had people say that they've held on to it for 25 years.
Hmm.
So I find that that's really important. So what are your questions?
Honestly, I think we've been able to address most of them as we've gone along. So I don't know that I really have anything that I have saved for the end.
All right, good. So in
Excellent.
January 18th, going to look at how to use movement and games.
Yes, and I'm signed up for that.
Oh, wonderful.
Yes,
This is a really a fun one.
good.
Writing is probably not so interesting, but movement and games, a whole different ball game.
Yeah.
Use games right now or movement
No, I don't.
at all? Okay.
Mm-mm.
All right. Then this will be an eye opener for you.
Yeah. And this is part of what I mean about needing to refresh some of my skills and my approach. I think I've gotten pretty predictable in some of my course design.
And we do. When I think
Mhm.
about what the kinds of things that I experimented with at the beginning, I'm always trying to learn and do new things, but there's some things that I used to do that I don't do anymore.
Mhm.
Step back and you think, now why not? That worked really well.
Mhm.
What's the
That's right.
problem? So, what's your key takeaway?
I would say it's an inspiration to incorporate more of the experiential and not to avoid the role playing or the radio theater because it will make people uncomfortable. Uncomfortable is the point.
And always giving them I always give people a choice. I think once they know they have a choice, that frees them, just like your German participant.
Mm-hmm. That's a good advice.
So if this was useful at all, I would really appreciate it if you would leave just a brief review. This is at Kat, can you put that in the chat? No, Kat's still here. Let me see if
I'm here.
I can do that. Everyone, there we go. Did I do it right? 3G YV 2 SY. There it is. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Deb. It was wonderful. And I will follow up with you.